All right. Can I be heard?
Mic check. Uh-oh. No, I'm just kidding.
All right. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Jeremy, it needs to be turned up. Is this sound okay, everybody? Up a little bit. Up a little bit. It would be the not my mic, but the whole system. Oh, there you go. Is that better? Yeah. Yes. Okay. All right. I am going to be presenting Shining His Face on Israel, Part 3, Deconstructing Race. And so it's a lot of information. We're going to take our time, and we're going to deconstruct race. And happy Black History Month. So, what does that mean? And you'll see as we go through. So let me pray. Abba Yah, I thank you for this day. Father, I thank you for this opportunity, this time. Father, I pray that your word would go forth in freedom and in truth and in liberty, in love, that it will be presented in a way where we make up our own minds, Father, and we choose to follow you. So we thank you for this day. We thank you for your goodness and your mercy. We thank you for being gracious to us. We thank you for your word. We thank you for wanting those that worship you to worship in spirit and in truth, Father. Yeah. And we want to break down the thoughts, the negativity, anything that exalts itself above the true knowledge of the Most High God. So we thank you that you have given us insight, that you have given us revelation to your truth and your word, that we can return fully, that we can move ideas and ideologies that do not match you and have truth. So we thank you for this day and this opportunity. And in Yeshua Messiah we pray. Amen. Amen. All right, so here we go. Disclaimer. I just copied that from my hubby. All of the personal beliefs and lifestyles of all non-biblical sources do not or does not reflect the personal or biblical views of this fellowship. The sources only back up the points of this presentation. Somebody can get me John 8:32, please. John 8:32.
Rita.
John 8:32.
Gotcha.
Okay, thank you.
John 8. Test. I'm not on.
Oh, make sure that box on top is on. If not, you just have to speak loud. Just read it. It's okay.
Okay.
We're not loud.
And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free.
Okay. If we look at Isaiah 6, and I'm going to go ahead and start in verse 1. In the year of King Uzziah, in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on the throne, high and lifted up, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above it stood seraphim. Each one had 6 wings, and 2 of them he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one cried to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the posts of the door were shaken by the voice of him who cried, and the house was filled with smoke. So I said, Woe to me, for I am undone, because I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Then one of the seraphim flew to me, having in his hand a live coal, which he had taken from the tongs from the altar, And he touched my mouth with it and said, Behold, this has touched your lips, your iniquity is taken away, and your sin is purged. Also I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send, and who shall go for us? And then I said, here I am, send me. And he said, go and tell this people, keep on hearing and do not understand. Keep on seeing and do not perceive. Make the heart of this people dull and their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their heart and return and be healed. So today, we are seeking to see with our eyes, hear with our ears, understand with our heart, so that we can return and be healed. Malcolm X said, I have had enough of someone else's propaganda. I'm for truth no matter who tells it. I'm for justice no matter who is for against it. I'm a human being first and foremost, and as much as I am for whoever and whatever benefits humanity as a whole. So, deconstruct. We were with a previous fellowship, and my husband had wrote a book, Lost and Without an Identity, until now. And we were asked to write another book that toned down the first book. And the father said, deconstruct race. And I was like, okay, what does that mean and why am I having to do that? So to deconstruct race, is to take apart or examine in order to reveal the biases or composition, often with the intention of exposing biases, flaws, or inconsistencies. And so that's what we started to do. So what is the lie that is embedded in race? Just race itself. Like you're black, or I'm black, you're white, you're whatever. Like, is that true? Is that a true description of someone? So, just going to go through. All right, this is an article in a real magazine. It's called The Plain Truth. It was published in 1963. The author of this magazine is a Sabbath keeper. They eat clean. They keep the holy days. Okay? So I'll share this, but that link, you can see the whole article. But it says the Jews are white. Christ was a Jew, so Christ is white and not black, as some fanatical Negro religious leaders deceived some American Negro followers into believing. Christ was white. Adam looked like Christ, so Adam was white. And he was the human father of all races. How then did yellow and black races develop from Adam? Okay, I'm going to skip over to the other side. It said the first men were intelligent, modern, not savage or semi-animal subhumans. And the Bible reveals that these first men were white. But where then did Chinese, Indians, Negroes come from? They all came from Adam. We find the answer in the Bible, which is the foundation of all knowledge and is proven facts of physical science. Remember, races differ in size and variation of facial features as well as color. The Bible, the first development of races, is found in Genesis. We find record existing before the flood of giants, men of giant stature, and they were black. 1963. Then also again we find record of them after the flood, descendants of Noah's son Ham. Also in this magazine, The Plain Truth, 1963, how races originated. The Oriental race is a mutation from Adam's stock, which occurred at some point in some generation after Adam. The same is true of the Negro. A mutation is not inferior to its parent stock. It goes on. But once the mutation occurred, the Negro was born. The Negro from then on produces after its own likeness, no longer after Adam's likeness. He is the result of a natural change. And that change is good and should be kept pure and not degenerated into mongrel stock. God planned for these mutations to occur. They are for good, not bad. Once a mutation occurs, it will remain pure and constant unless a man perverts God's laws by interbreeding and producing a mongrel or a hybrid. The mutation is God's doing, not man's. In the Kingdom Identity Ministries, which I got from this book, One Race, One Blood is by Ken Ham and Charles Ware. If you've ever been to Kentucky to the Ark, the big Noah's Ark, then they wrote this book. I have it on Kindle and I have a hard copy, but they were talking about the different ideas and doctrines that go against the Word. So in the doctrinal statement of the Kingdom Identity Ministries, it says, we believe the white, Anglo-Saxon, Germanic, and kindred people to be God's true, literal, chosen children of Israel. This chosen seed line making up the Christian nations, and they give Bible verses, of the earth stands far superior to all other peoples in their call as God's servant race. We believe the man Adam is the father of the white race only. Yes, one race, one blood. All right, in another article, the destructive nature of the term race, growing beyond false paradigm, it mentions one of the first botanists or explorers to talk about race and where people came from. He published a book called The Systems of Nature, and this article was written in 1998. The group from the Americas was identified as the subspecies Homo sapien americanus and given the color red, the humor chloric, and the posture upright. They were described as obstinate, merry, free, and painted with fine red lines, apparently Native Americans. Europeans, Homo sapien europaeus, were labeled as white, optimistic, and muscular, gentle, active, very smart, inventive, and covered with close vestments. Asians were identified as pale, yellow, melancholy, stiff, severe, haughty, greedy, and covered with loose garments. The African peoples were described as black, slow, foolish, relaxed, crafty, indolent, negligent, and were people who anointed themselves with grease. This is in a book by Linnaeus, who is a Swiss botanist. All right, okay, so in 1775, you got Johann Blumenbach, who is a protege of Linnaeus. So he went even further to classify people. And so he had the most influential and racial classification systems that we see even today that dominate culture. He was considered one of the greatest and most honored scientists of his time. He wrote on the nature, variety of mankind, and he's from Germany. And to understand Blumenbach's classification system, it is important to understand the criteria he used to name the European race Caucasian. Adherently to the biblical version of human creation, Blumenbach reasoned that if God created humans in his image, God certainly would have chosen white people as the variant, erroneously believing that original humans evolved from the region of the Caucasus Mountains in Russia between the Black and Caspian Seas, and believing that the most beautiful of all Europeans were the Georgian women. In this region he named the variety of light-skinned people of Europe and adjacent parts of Asia and Africa Caucasians. So, what is the truth? What is the truth? We're going to look at this because the plain truth, that magazine was in 1963 and people were committed to that beyond a shadow of a doubt. In 1942, Ashley Montagu, Man's Most Dangerous Myth, The Fallacy of Race, was written in 1942. and they shunned him because of the truth that he shared about where we come from. Knowledge of the truth does not always help change emotional attitudes that draw their real strength from the subconscious or from factors beside real issues. Knowledge of the truth, however, can prevent rationalizations and of reprehensible acts of behavior prompted by feelings that men will not easily avow openly. That is from UNESCO. UNESCO is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. In 1950, they came out and said that race is a myth, that it is a social construct, that it is not real, that there is no one that is white like this sheet of paper or black like the print of ink on it. That is not real, that is an illusion.
They said what?
That is not real, that it's an illusion in 1950. So, the idea of race, this is Montagu, represents one of the most dangerous myths of our time and one of the most tragic. Myths are most effective and perilous when they remain unrecognized for what they are. We may realize that a myth is faulty explanation leading to social delusion and error, but we do not necessarily realize that we ourselves share in the myth-making faculty with all people of all times and places, or that each of us has his own store of myths derived from the traditional stock of the society in which we live and are always ready in supply. Let's go to James chapter 3. James chapter 3. Alright, James 3 and 17, it says, "But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, willing to yield, full of mercy and good fruits, without," what? Partiality. And without hypocrisy.
Go ahead.
Now the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. So we can't own our biases if we don't acknowledge that they exist.
Right. Say it again.
I said, we can't own our biases if we don't acknowledge that they exist. It is proven that race is a social, political creation and it is a product of human invention. It's a myth. Melanin. So then we have to understand what melanin is. If that's a myth and that's not true, then what is melanin? Skin color is a result of the presence of melanin. What color is melanin? It's a dark brown pigment found in the skin. With the exception of albinos, all people have the same number of melanin-forming cells in their skin. So that means we're all what color?
Brown.
Brown.
Don't dig then.
So we're all what color?
Brown.
We're all brown. All of us.
That's what melanin means, what's that?
Melanin, yes. Melanin is just, that's what makes your skin pigmentation. And we all of it. Skin color is the result of the presence of melanin, a dark brown pigment found in the skin. So we're all what color?
Brown.
Brown.
Say that again.
So, to say, I love my child. To say anything else is a what? Is a lie. The father of lies comes to kill, steal, and destroy.
Go ahead.
Think of how much has been destroyed over a lie. Because some people are Italian and they're from here, but no, you don't say that. Oh, you're just in a box, just to check a box, black or white. Pick one. I remember a few years ago that our instructional coach was telling us of a student who was so upset because he did not want to mark the black box. He didn't understand why there wasn't a brown option. And she couldn't explain it. We had a class that was reading To Kill a Mockingbird, and they were whatever, and I got to share that we're all brown, and another instructional coach was talking around me, but not to me, and so we couldn't all be brown. I don't know where she got that. Okay?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Adam and Eve. Incidentally, Adam and Eve could not have been, as they are often drawn, blue-eyed, pale-skinned, and blonde. If they had been, they could not have given risen to all variety in the coloring shading of their offspring today. In all probability, they had middle brown skin, brown hair, and brown eyes. If Adam and Eve had been, they talk about the lettering of heterozygotes, I can't even say all these words, but they had a capital A, capital B, little b. So if you have all lowercase a's, you're very, 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 very light. Then you can't produce only very, 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 very light. So the people would have to be mixed or middle brown in order to produce very light shades and very dark shades.
Right.
It's impossible.
That's true.
And even if they we're all what shade?
Brown.
Brown. Some tortilla, some mocha, some Casper, done. But it's all brown. It's all brown. So they would have been middle brown in color, and from in them one generation, racial differences easily could have occurred. Note after note after note after note. UNESCO also said in 1950, science has faced with the problem of race at the beginning of the 19th century with the great evolutionary theories. So Darwin, his ideas. They've been discussing race. It's been an issue, but it did not come into the forefront until Darwinism and all that stuff, which says we evolved from animals. So the idea was that black people or Negroes evolved from a less intelligent animal than Caucasians. They were the most intelligent. So then this caste system of separating people and intelligence based on the color of your skin became prominent. And so therefore we can test people, we can run tests, we can examine this, we can test this, we can pull you apart because you're not really human. As in the plain truth, they said we came from giants, which is not true. Because we're all one.
Right.
Because our Father does not show partiality.
That's right.
So that makes sense.
Go ahead and teach.
All right.
Go ahead.
All right, that was UNESCO. Again, this is 1950. Why not teach that? Because I know in an 8th grade science room in Tennessee, they teach about the Big Bang Theory and they teach about evolution. They teach that. You can believe what you want, but this is the standard. So if you're going to teach evolution, then there is a question, well, how come, then how does that, and there's easy answers. You can Google this. But our kids still don't know that.
That's right.
I had an 8th grader 2 years ago call me a black NB. And we in the 2000th century, you know, because they're ignorant. They don't know you brown just like me.
That's right.
Nobody's teaching that. Because there's an overwhelming amount of folklore. When we talked about folklore, when we talked about Homeboy, overwhelming amount of folklore in education. Biologically, race is really only skin deep.
That's right.
The fact is there is little genetic diversity among humans has been known for a while, long time, but not widely understood. In fact, in 1950, the United Nations at UNESCO issued a statement that all humans belong to the same species and that race is not a biological reality, but a myth. Isaiah 55. Isaiah 55. All right, Isaiah 55, starting in verse 7, it says, "Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him return to the Lord, and he will have mercy on him, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon. For my thoughts are not your thoughts,
That's right.
nor are your ways my ways, says the Most High. As for the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." The genetic differences between any two people, at first it was like 0.2%, but once they researched, the genetic difference between any two people is from 0.5 to 0.9%.
Not even 1%.
Not even 1%. The genetic differences between any two people. Racial characteristics account for 6% of that variation.
Wow.
So racial genetic variations between human beings is 0.054%. Just saying. So the author of the Plain Truth magazine, who is Herbert W. Armstrong, is a liar in that aspect.
Yeah, shots fired.
Although social sciences have failed to produce studies supporting the biological fact of race, the concept of the existence of race is so embedded in American culture that people seldom, if ever, question its reality or its meaning. In fact, the concept of race is so intrinsic in our worldview that the physical differences among people are interpreted as evidence for the existence of race and the disparities. Separating people is seen as part of the natural order of things.
Wow.
But it doesn't match with the word.
Correct. That's right.
So this is a worldview. But he says to be in the world,
That's right.
not of it. So his people have to see differently. So we have to look at culture. We have to look at culture. I feel like I'm going to miss something.
You're all right.
Also in that journal, all men are created equal, and the right to equal opportunity or the ideas of freedom of speech and religion or the press. Okay. Within the natural, cultural, or ethnic groups, within each ethnic group are behaviors, beliefs, and practices that are unique to that ethnic culture. Although some elements of an ethnic group may be shared by other groups, elements of the ethnic group might be, but most likely are not, shared by the national culture. What should be clear is that culture and ethnicity are very often intertwined, maybe even sharing a rich history, but culture and ethnicity are not race. Culture and ethnicity are not race. Race is solely based, so it's an arbitrary classification. Culture represents the behaviors and beliefs that characterize a particular group. Ethnicity is embedded within the culture. Okay? Okay. At the end of the article, it says, the racial differences separating us are negligible. People are not separated from one another by race, but by culture, social and economic differences.
There you go.
Okay?
Right.
So it's not Like, we have made it in our minds to be that, but that ain't it. It's cultural things that separate us. It's social things, and then it's economics that separate us. The concept of race is confused, inconsistent, and scientifically unsound. It simply serves as a device to justify one's group domination over another. And this is from counseling and development, and we contend that this term has no place in the helping profession. So, when we look at race and culture and ethnicity, that's what we're going to look at. Okay. So, this book was just part of me wanting to be more culturally responsive in my teaching. Talks about 3 levels of culture. There's surface culture, there's shallow culture, and then there's deep culture. Surface culture is food, dress, music, holidays. Shallow culture is the unspoken rule around everyday social interactions. Like for when the room is full and a woman comes in and the man gives up his seat, you know, or how we have certain people have their kids say yes ma'am, no ma'am. Like, that is shallow culture, but it's put into deep cultural value. Deep culture governs how we learn new information. Unconscious assumptions. That's deep culture. Okay? And I will share this. But I know you can't see it all, but it's a tree, and they talk about the level of culture. The surface culture is like the leaves on the tree, okay? So the food, the clothes, the games, the drama, the literature, the stories, holidays, cooking, how you talk, like all of that, songs you listen to, that's surface culture. Surface culture and shallow culture are not static. They change and shift over time as social groups move around and ethnic groups intermarry, resulting in a cultural mosaic, just as branches and fruit on a tree change in response to the seasons and its environment. Deep culture is like the root system of a tree. It is what grounds the individual and nourishes his mental health. It is the bedrock of self-concept, group identity, approaches to problem solving, and decision making. So, if we think about America, there's a culture in America, you know, and for so-called blacks, we lost a culture that was established for us. We lost the culture. So we're getting back to culture. We have the hair, we got the ZZs, we wear but that's surface.
Go ahead.
Surface. It's a look.
Teach it.
Okay?
Talk about it.
But Mashiach was focused on deep culture.
Go ahead.
He was focused on how you think, how you learn. Just, I mean, think about that. He's walking through the temple. Folks got their stuff on.
That's right.
But he's still calling out behaviors because they haven't gotten to the deep culture. Deep culture is the root system of the tree. Colossians says stay connected to the root. Deep culture is what grounds the individual and nourishes the mental health. Yeshua, Jesus, was focused on the deep culture. He didn't care what you look like. Because he understood that we're all what color? We're all brown. When he saw the crowd, we talked about this morning, he saw that they were lost and without a shepherd.
That's right.
He saw that they needed compassion. He saw that they were sheep with no one to lead them. They were sheep that didn't have a voice that they could hear and follow. So he was coming and instilling deep culture. I'm going to give you an identity. I'm going to tell you who your father is. I'm going to tell you what you need to be doing. I'm going to give you your identity back. Show you how to solve problems. Help you make better decisions. I'm going to nourish your mental health. So Yeshua was focused on deep culture.
That's good.
So when we were at the prayer, my mom had something, Juneteenth celebration. And we were out there ready to pray for folks, and homeboy walked up and asked me where my Z's were.
Right.
That is surface culture, sir.
Correct. There you go. That's right.
That is surface culture, sir.
Talk about it.
Where's my husband? Please look at him. No.
That's right.
That's surface culture. Is your behavior changed? Is your mental health nourished? This culture, we can't, shotgun on that culture, that's us, that's me, that's me. No, because you ain't write that.
Right.
Deuteronomy 4. You didn't create that. That's not yours to call shotgun on, like my boys when they want to be in the front seat. Deuteronomy chapter 4. Deuteronomy chapter 4, starting in verse 5. Surely I have taught you statutes and judgments, just as the Lord my God commanded me, that you should act according to them in the land which you go to possess. Therefore be careful to observe them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of all peoples, who will hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is wise and understanding. For what great nation is there that has God so near to it as the Lord our God is to us? For whatever reason we may call upon him. He established the culture.
Go ahead.
He established that.
Go ahead.
When we came out. And that was a mixed multitude that came out. So he established a culture for them. So we're returning to something that he created.
Go ahead, one.
We can't. That's not ours.
That's right.
That's his. And whosoever will is invited to partake in it. So no, we can't call shotgun on God's culture. It is his. Within the culture, and when you look at these, because within the culture they call it an archetype, but the culture is either divided into individualism, gentlemen, or collectivism. Individualism is focused on independence and individual achievement. It emphasizes self-reliance and the belief that one is supposed to take care of himself and get ahead. Learning happens through individual study and reading. Individual contributions and status are important. It's very competitive, and it's technical and analytical. Another part of deep culture is collectivism. It's focused on interdependence and group success. It emphasizes self-reliance on the collective wisdom and resources of the group, and the belief that the group members take care of each other to get ahead. Learning happens through the group interaction and dialogue. Group dynamics and harmony are important, collaborative, and it's relational. So the Father's deep culture is collectivism. Now you can look at other cultures and see where this is dominant, but it's not based on race. They have a cultural index. The United States individual index is 91. They have the highest. So when you come from a people who are more collective in their culture, and it says that Latinos, African Americans, and one more, they have a high collective culture. That means they're big on relationships. They're big on collaboration. They think the group is important. Okay? And then when you get in the word that it says to be in one mind, that you work together, that you be in one spirit. When you think about Miriam and them coming out, and I'm jumping ahead, in Exodus 15 when they came out of Egypt, and I'm going to jump ahead because it talks about oral and written tradition. Some cultures have relied on the spoken word rather than the written word to convey, preserve, and reproduce knowledge from generation to generation. By telling stories and coding knowledge into songs, chants, proverbs, and poetry, groups with strong oral tradition record and sustain their cultures and cultural identities by word of mouth. The oral tradition places a heavy emphasis on relationships because the process connects the speaker and listener in a communal experience. Oral tradition makes the most of the brain's memory systems by using alliteration, movement, and emotion as strong cognitive anchors. Performance-based practices such as dancing and drumming are also used to encode knowledge. And when you think of Exodus 15, in Exodus 15, they just came out of Egypt, and they wrote Moses had a song, and Miriam danced, and they played the drum. But the U.S. has, its individualistic marker is at a 91. That is the highest of all countries. On page 28. It says, Latin and African countries have high collectivist cultures. They also have high oral traditions. But we're all what color? Brown. We're all brown. I came back to that, but I hit on that. Let's go to 2 Corinthians chapter 10. Second Corinthians chapter 10. Second Corinthians chapter 10, starting in verse 3, says, For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God, for pulling down strongholds, casting down arguments, and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of God, bringing every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ, and being ready to punish all disobedience when your obedience is fulfilled. The concept of race is based on a lie used to separate, divide, and oppress. Race is a concept that seeks to exalt itself against the knowledge of the Most High. But we have been judging by appearance ever since the beginning. So you think of Eve in the garden in Genesis 3. The fruit looked good.
That's right. Talk about
Father already said, don't touch it.
Talk about it.
We were complaining in the wilderness because we didn't see water.
Right.
Not that it wasn't there.
That's right.
We didn't see it.
Go
The
ahead.
servant man of Yah in 2 Kings, like he was scared and shaky until Elijah prayed that the Father would open his eyes, and then he could see the hosts around him with chariots of fire. We have been judging by appearance since the beginning. But that's not what our teacher did.
That's right.
He judged by the fruit. He judged by the fruit.
Talk
He
about it.
understood that we were all the same color. So there is no caste system. There is no hierarchy with that. You're not more intelligent or less because of the color of your skin.
That's right.
It's melanin, and it's a dark brown, and everybody got it, unless you're albino. That means you don't have any. And that's why you can get sick easier. You need vitamin D. All of that stuff goes. It's all scientific, and you use science, facts, word to help build your case. Evolution is losing that case.
That's right.
The fact that we have schools and they have these subcategories, and we're still looking at how well black students do compared to white students. If you would embrace culture from both sides, everyone would do a whole lot better.
All right now. That's the truth.
But we keep dividing them. And the subgroup is always a minority group. Even in a school, the subgroup is always, that doesn't make sense. But we're focused on the myth.
That's great.
In John 8, let's go to John 8. in John 8. And we'll start in 13. The Pharisees therefore said to him, "You bear witness of yourself. Your witness is not true." Yeshua answered and said to them, "Even if I bear witness of myself, my witness is true, for I know where I came from and where I am going. But you do not know where I came from and where I am going. You judge according to the flesh. I judge no one. And yet, if I do judge, my judgment is true. For I am not alone, but I am with the Father who sent me. It is also written in your law that the testimony of two men is true. I am one who bears witness of myself, and the Father who sent me bears witness of me. You judge according to the flesh." Flip back to John 7:24. John 7:24 says, "Do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment." Do not judge according to appearance, but judge with righteous judgment. Isaiah chapter 11. Isaiah chapter 11. Starting at verse 1. "There shall come forth a rod from the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. The Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. His delight is in the fear of the Lord, and he shall not judge by the sight of his eyes, nor decide by the hearing of his ears. But with righteousness he shall judge the poor, and decide with equity for the meek of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall slay the wicked. And he shall not judge by the sight of his eyes." But we have been judging since appearance, since the beginning. Leviticus chapter 19. Leviticus chapter 19. Starting in verse 11. "You shall not steal, nor deal falsely, nor lie to one another. And you shall not swear by my name falsely, nor shall you profane the name of your God, for I am the Lord. You shall not cheat your neighbor, nor rob him. The wages of him who is hired shall not remain with you all night until morning. You shall not curse the deaf, nor put a stumbling block before the blind, but shall fear your God. I am the Lord. You shall do no injustice in judgment. You shall not be partial to the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty. In righteousness you shall judge your neighbor," which means you cannot judge by appearance or the flesh, if you are to do that. Acts 17. Acts 17. I'm going to start right a little bit before verse 24. "Therefore, the one whom you worship without knowing him I proclaim to you. God who made the world and everything in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth, does not dwell in temples made with hands, nor is he worshipped with men's hands as though he needed anything, since he gives to all life, breath, and all things. And he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their appointed times and the boundaries of their dwelling, so that they should seek the Lord in the hope that they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. So he made all from one. This right there. This culture that Yah established is for whosoever will. And we're not going to turn there. In 1 Corinthians 15 and 50, it says, flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of Yah. Let's go to Jeremiah 16. Jeremiah 16. Jeremiah 16. Let me get there. Starting in verse 14. Therefore, behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, that it shall be no more be said, the Lord lives who brought up the children of Israel from the land of Egypt. But the Lord lives who brought the children of Israel from the land of the north and from all the lands where he had driven them. For I will bring them back into their land which I have gave to their fathers. Behold, I will send for many fishermen, says the Lord, and they shall fish them. And afterward I will send for many hunters, and they shall hunt them from every mountain and every hill, and out of the holes of the rocks. For my eyes are on all their ways. They are not hidden from my face, nor is their iniquity hidden from my eyes. And first I will repay double for their iniquity and their sin, because they have defiled my land. They have filled my inheritance with the carcasses of their detestable and abominable idols. O Lord, my strength and my fortress, my refuge in the day of affliction. The Gentiles shall come to you from the ends of the earth. Surely our fathers have inherited lies, worthlessness, and unprofitable things, when a man makes gods for himself, which are not gods. Surely our fathers have inherited lies. We must remember our occupation in Exodus 19. We must remember our occupation. Exodus 19 starting in verse 5. Exodus 19 and 5. Well, I'll go to 3, sorry. And Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the children of Israel, You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And we talked about that. That priest is Kohen, but when you look at that word, it means to be a base for the community. So he wanted Israel to be a base for all the nations, to teach instruction to all the nations. He chose them based on his promise, which he fulfills his word every time. So the culture of this world does not fit the word. The culture of this world does not fit the word. The culture of this world says that people with darker skin are supposed to have this wrong with them. They're supposed to live here. They're supposed to do this. Hold your purse. There is a idea that comes with race and racism. And no one, even though it's been proven time and time again, is going to tell you that it's not true. It's a myth. Does racism exist? Absolutely, yes. But it exists based on a lie.
That's right. Go to tell me, girl.
It exists based on a lie. But we trust in the world. And we won't change for the most time. We'll just keep doing what feels good. That is also a lie. That comes from the father of lies. Lies believed affect the cycle of love and trust. It affects it. To believe a lie will mess up your whole world.
True.
But what's true is that God is love. He is long-suffering. He is patient. He is right there waiting. But you have to hear and you got to turn. That's true. And you can put everything you got on it because he's faithful. He will not deny himself. But we have been fed lies. After lie, after lie, after lie. And we are worth so much more than what we have been told.
Yes.
So this is not a call to be colorblind. Not at all. No, 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 no. I would never say that because to be colorblind is to be ignorant of social injustices. So no, I would never tell you to be colorblind, but to see the truth, to look at your neighbor and to see you are just like me. Because he says to love your neighbor. Well, who is your neighbor? Who is your neighbor? Is anyone not your neighbor? Because if they're not, then he also says to love your enemy. So you don't get out of it. Either way it goes. Let's go to, we're going to close with Mark chapter 6. Mark chapter 6. We're going to start in verse 30. And before we read that, I was headed home and I was like, Father, what do I say? Give me words and all that stuff. And he said, tell the people to sit down and hush. Like it's time to hush. I don't know if that's the be still and know type hush, but just hush. Like, yes, Black Lives Matter, but technically we're all brown. So sit down and hush. Stand up and get to work. Sit down and hush. Stand up and get to work. You are a royal priesthood sent to establish the nations. He doesn't leave anybody out. You will either serve or bow. And we have done it our own way long enough. And if you want to have a testimony of how your own word worked out for you, we'll pass you the mic. I don't think anybody's going to stand on that. There has to be a realization that, when I do it my way, I fail miserably every time. There's not a time when it was just our way that worked out. That's not going to happen because he didn't design it like that. We are designed to need him. We are created to worship.
Right.
So, sit down and hush, stand up and get to work. Mark chapter 6, then starting in verse 30, then the apostles gathered to Jesus and told him all the things, both what they had done and what they had taught. And he said to them, "Come aside by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while." For there were many coming and going that did not even have time to eat. So they departed to a deserted place in a boat by themselves. But the multitude saw them departing, and many knew him and ran there on foot from all the cities. They arrived before them and came together to him. And Jesus, when he came out, he